We'll just go ahead with Jack Sanford from Sherlock, who's going to talk about who's going to talk about the unreasonable effectiveness of audit contests.
Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. I know insurance is not always the most exciting topic ever, but I promise that it's a very important one, and it's going to get crypto to mass adoption. So we need you guys to be here. I appreciate it. So some quick background on Sherlock before I get into the talk. Sherlock is a smart contract insurer, totally trustless on-chain insurer. Right now, we are insuring about $35 million on-chain for protocols such as Open, Euler, Teller, Tempest, who else? Hook, Liquify, bunch of guys, bunch of newly launched protocols. So really excited about that. And for Sherlock and for DeFi insurance, what we really care about is making sure that protocols are safe, obviously, and we don't have payouts. And so that's why we've gotten super deep into how do we prevent payouts, how do we make sure code is safe, and that mostly looks like audits right now. Although Muli and Sertora are doing formal verification, there's a bunch of other really exciting things that are audit adjacent that really help with security as well. And one of them is audit contests. And basically, audit contests, if you don't know what they are, if you don't know what they are, maybe you've heard of Code Arena. That's probably the biggest audit contest provider or runner in the space right now. They've been around for about 2 years or so, year and a half. And the way it works is they basically just say, here's an $80,000 pool of money, and anybody who finds a bug in these certain smart contracts gets some of that money. So it's sort of competitive. It's open to anybody in the world to compete in these contests, and based on the severity of the bugs that they find in those contracts, they get paid some of that $80,000. So this is a contest that Sherlock ran for our protocol, I think back in January. It was an $80,000 pool. Here are the top performers who got paid, $11,000 and amounts in that range. So that's basically what an audit contest is. And Sherlock cares about this new type of audit because we're always trying to figure out what is the safest way to secure protocols on chain. What's the best way to secure protocols on chain? So I went through every single audit contest that's ever been done for you guys and looked at the data to see how audit contests have performed, not necessarily compared to audits and specific audit companies, but just standalone, how have audit contests been doing? And these slides will be available afterwards, so you can go to that link and you can see this data set. Oops. Okay, so the first contest that was run by Code Arena was 1.5 years ago. They've run 154 unique contests, so you can think of that as audits. They've done 154 audits in that time. They've done it for 110 different protocols, as big as Aave, OpenSea, and as small as anyone who wants to put up a $20,000, $30,000 pot. So all across the spectrum. And on average, the contests have finished about 7.5 months ago. That's just important because we're trying to figure out if these audit contests secured the code. And so on average, that code has been on chain for, you can probably say, 6 or 7 months. So that's a decent amount of time for it to have had the possibility of being hacked. So I think this is a fairly decent data set. A lot of these protocols have been on chain long enough to see if the code is at least somewhat secure. So how many hacks do you guys think have happened in those 154 contests? Anybody? 3? Okay. 7? 42? 0? How many? 2,000? I like it. So let me remember the number off my head, but off the top of my head, I believe it's 14 have been hacked since the contest, but a lot of those were either front-end hacks or admin key issues or things that were out of scope for Code Arena. So I went through every single contest. I went through every single one of those hacks, looked to see if they were basically Code Arena's fault or not, or within scope of the audit, to see how Code Arena actually performed, how audit contests actually performed. So their 7th contest ever was the launch of Meebits. Some of you guys have probably heard about it or potentially heard about the bug that happened on the, I believe it was the first day or the first week of the Meebits launch. Basically, the contract allowed people to brute force rare Meebits. The Meebits actually made it even easier by showing the data set of where the rare Meebits would be based on the sort of NFT that you own. I believe it was CryptoPunks and potentially one other that you could mint Meebits with. And so this contract was audited by Code Arena in an audit contest, but it was not really Code Arena's fault that this hack happened, because they flagged it as a medium issue, and they said, hey, random index is not truly random. There's a possibility of minting a specific token ID. Basically, there's a possibility that you could brute force the rare Meebits, and that's exactly what happened. And Meebits, for whatever reason, decided not to fix this medium vulnerability. So another one, contest number 9, Visor Finance. Their Code Arena contest finished on May 19th. They were hacked 3 times in that year after that contest, June 19th and then in November and December. First one was an admin key was stolen, so that's not really in scope of an audit. The next one was the deposit basically used a spot price instead of using a TWAP, something like that. So again, this was back last year when TWAPs were a little bit less well-known or prevalent. And then the third one was just a logic issue where the deposit contract or the deposit function asked the attacker's contract to approve the attacker's contract. And obviously the attacker will approve its own contract so it can execute on the attack. All 3 of these hacks or issues were out of scope. So it was not necessarily the fault of the audit contest itself. It was not missed in the audit contest. And so, those were both in the first 10 contests. There were probably 10 people that competed in those. Nowadays, we're seeing over 100 people compete in audit contests. But basically, to answer the question of how many hacks have happened on that audited code in those audit contests, the answer is 0. No hacks have happened in 154 audits with audit contests. And I think that's pretty crazy. The rest of Sherlock thinks that's pretty crazy too. And we think it's fairly statistically significant in terms of showing that audit contests can be a really valuable way to secure code when it goes to mainnet or before it goes to mainnet. So audit contests are really great. They have this really crazy raw horsepower where you can incentivize like 100 people to come look at your code base, but there are some issues with it. Basically, you don't actually know that a talented auditor is going to show up on any given week. And that can be a problem, especially as more of these audit contests happen and some slip through the cracks, or maybe you don't incentivize the pool to be big enough for talented people to show up. There's also no guarantee that, let's say a talented person does show up and they show up in the rankings and you say, great, they spent time on the code base. They could have spent an hour on the code base. And maybe nobody, it's like the bystander effect. Maybe everyone was busy or had a wedding or whatever that week and didn't actually look at your code base much. So that's a risk. And the last one is there's no fixed reviews. So basically, when you do an audit, usually there are some kind of issues, and the protocol team needs to go and fix those issues. Code Arena does not really offer that. Audit contests don't really offer that sort of functionality, that kind of fixed review. And they often make the protocol team look at hundreds of issues. A lot of them are duplicate issues. A lot of them are low informational issues, things that you don't necessarily care about for securing the code on mainnet. And it's a pretty big burden sometimes. We've been through it with, I think, 400 issues and trying to go through, figure out which ones are real, which ones aren't. It's not very easy. So that's audit contests. Traditional legacy audits, kind of what we're all used to in this room. I'm sure you've heard about them. It's 2 or 3 talented auditors looking at a code base for a defined period of time, usually 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, something like that. The problem with that approach is only 2 or 3 people look at your code. And those 2 or 3 people are not perfect, or they focus on certain vulnerabilities and are better at, finding these things than those things. And so there are often or sometimes holes when you only have 2 or 3 people look at the code base. Sherlock experienced this ourselves. We had a high severity bug. We did a top tier audit from a top tier audit firm, and then we did a code arena contest, and the code arena contest found a high severity bug in our code that could have caused a lot of problems for us on mainnet that was missed by the top sort of audit firm. And the other crazy thing about that is the people who found that high severity bug were ranked number 30 and number 66 on Code Arena. So even if you tried to get the top 5 guys on Code Arena to look at your code, you still would have missed this bug. So we think that's kind of crazy. Some other problems with legacy audits: there's no direct incentive to secure the code base. There's reputation. Everybody knows about that. There's auditor reputation, and it's kind of this amorphous thing that's been built over years. And one bug for one contest doesn't necessarily change an auditor's reputation, so there might not be that much incentive to do a really great job on your audit specifically. And there's often long lead times, but that can kind of change as demand for audits fluctuates. So at Sherlock, we care about securing code as best as possible so that we do not have payouts on the insurance side. We asked ourselves, is there a way to get the best of both worlds, where you can have top-tier auditors who are dedicated to your code base for a certain amount of time, incentivized to find bugs, but also have a contest pot where anybody in the world can show up and submit a vulnerability or find something crazy that only they know how to look for and get paid for it. And some other things like, can you have a fix review with it as well, which audit contests don't really offer right now? Can you have concisely reported issues, which audit contests don't really offer right now? Can you do on-demand scheduling, which legacy audits can be very difficult to do that, whereas audit contests, you can start them within a couple of days from when you decide you want to do it. So basically, Sherlock is launching this product, and it's going live tomorrow. And it is totally transparent in terms of the pricing and the contest and how everything is going to work. For a normal 2-week audit, it's a $75K cost with a $50K contest pot. So you can think about 2/3 of that audit cost goes to a contest pot, and anybody in this room can come submit bugs and get part of that $50K. Then there's a top tier auditor, which is basically the person that we are incentivizing to actually spend time on that code base for that amount of time. And we pay them a fixed amount so that they will show up and we know that they're going to spend time, much like a legacy audit. And then the top tier auditor also does the fix review at the end. So that's a really important thing. You want to make sure that the fixes don't have issues themselves. So you have to check that. There's going to be an ELO style ranking system. So to become a top tier auditor, anybody in the world could do it. Anybody in this room could become a top tier auditor. All you have to do is perform well in a couple of contests. 2 to be precise, and you can become a top tier auditor and start making $20K every 2 weeks doing audits. And then of course, Sherlock is an insurer. So behind these audits, because we feel so comfortable about the kind of security of this hybrid approach, we write $10 million of TVL coverage, and we'll even cover your $1 million bug bounty through Immunify after you get this audit. So that's kind of the power of Sherlock. That is the next, what we think is the next generation of audits. And yeah, basically the first contest launches tomorrow. The signups just went live about an hour ago. You can sign up at sherlock.xyz. And again, anybody in this room can join, find a bug in the contract, and get paid thousands of dollars. So definitely check it out. go to the site, see if you can find bugs in sentiment, and there's going to be a lot more contests after that. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Hi. My question here.
Oh,
Just stand up. What's the level of coordination between auditors in a contest? Like,
With what?
I've been an auditor for some time, and I know that lots of the value that you would get in legacy audits is that auditors are working together, right? And they can exchange ideas. So I'm wondering, in Sherlock, me as an auditor, would I be working in a team of auditors, or would I be working alone? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Basically, there is a small trade-off there in terms of if you allow everybody to work together, then it's very difficult to figure out who is contributing how much and pay somebody for finding a bug because your whole team found that bug. And the way that Sherlock sort of handles that is you're allowed to sign up as a team or as an individual. And so, like with sentiment, the lead auditor on that, I believe, is going to be WatchPug, which is a team of, I believe, 3 auditors. And so they work together. They found that they're able to kind of collaborate best as a team instead of individually and maximize their earnings that way. And so that is a 100% viable approach, is to kind of find a team that you like, work with somebody you like, and decide, okay, we're going to compete as a team or we're going to compete as an individual.
I have a question about the insurance. Like, how do you price your insurance?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of, that's a great question. There's been a lot of iterations on pricing with Sherlock, with Nexus, with a bunch of different insurers. It's a very difficult thing. The root of that problem is that there is not a good data set of payouts, of claims, of hacks even, because DeFi is like 2 years old. Whereas if you were trying to insure hurricane risk in Florida, you've got 100 years of data, and maybe you adjust it slightly for global warming or something, but you have a pretty good sense of what the worst damage looks like, what the average damage looks like, things like that. We don't really have that in DeFi. So it's much more difficult to know where that pricing should be. And the way Sherlock does it is basically we say we have some audit requirements. We have a checklist of audit requirements that a protocol has to do before they get the audit from Sherlock. And if you meet those requirements, like having, I think, greater than 80% test coverage, things like that, then you're able to do the audit. And as long as you can kind of get the fixes done within a half-day period during the fix review, then you go through that full process and everybody gets priced at 2%. So we're just keeping it very simple for now. In the future, I think we very much will try to partner with people like Certora and lower that premium amount to 1.5 or 1.75% for doing formal verification and a bunch of these other things that also help secure a code base. But to keep it simple and to basically keep it simple for protocol teams, it's always 2%.
Yeah, I have a question here. So how do you determine when an incident happened, how do you determine whether that incident is due to, let's say, some external, like sushi or whatever, or is it due to the lack of inspection from the auditors?
So the first part is how do you know if it's due to sushi? Oh, like Oracle manipulation.
Oracle or whatever, the external contract.
Yeah. How do we determine that? It's fairly, a security expert can go through and decide, okay, this was caused because of an Oracle manipulation, like the TWAP moved from whatever to infinity or the highest solidity number possible. So that's fairly determinable. I assume your question is how do we decide it on the claims side? Like how if you're
exactly. Yeah. Probably that's a better way to phrase it.
Yeah. So in terms of the way Sherlock works, our claims process is fully on-chain, fully trustless. Sherlock, our team doesn't have control over whether a claim gets paid out or not. That's different than off-chain insurers or insurance companies where they tell you whether your claim gets paid out or not. So we think that's a really important part of DeFi and why DeFi crypto is so cool, because our entire claims process is in smart contracts. And basically there's 2 committees to it. So first committee is 4 of 7 multi-sig of some security experts in the space. And I think there's a Sherlock person on there as well. And they can decide, okay, we think the hack was due to sushi, which, whatever is not covered, some situation where it's not covered, or it's due to some situation that is covered because the audit that Sherlock did was messed up. That's the first committee. If that committee votes against the protocol and says it doesn't get paid out, then the protocol can escalate their claim to the UMA Optimistic Oracle. UMA Optimistic Oracle is basically thousands of UMA token holders. So UMA is a totally different protocol. Their whole purpose for being is to be a third-party sort of judge system. And so their token holders get to vote on whether the claim should get paid out or not. And that way it's sort of out of the hands of any individual or out of the hands of that 4 of 7 multi-sig. And we can talk about the price to bribe UMA and bribe the UMA token holders. And it has to do, there are some economic guarantees around UMA's market cap. But to keep it simple, 4 of 7 multi-sig is deciding first, and then UMA token holders decide second. Sherlock has no relationship or doesn't own any UMA tokens. So we think that that's a very unbiased way of deciding whether the claim should get paid out.
Yeah. So, sorry. One more question is, where's the payment coming from? Is it from the project, or do you guys actually staking to that vault?
Yes. So the payment for insurance comes from the project, which is different from how Nexus and some other insurers work, where it's user-based insurance. You can buy insurance for your position. Sherlock is fully protocol to protocol, kind of like B2B, I guess, where the protocol is the one deciding to buy the insurance and paying for the insurance and filing the claims.
Understood. Thanks. Sorry, one more question. How long is the insurance? Do you have an annual premium for that, or like your auto insurance?
Well, because it's on chain, we actually have to get the sort of funds up front. And so you basically pay money into the contract, and we slowly draw it down over time. So you can put 3 months worth in there. You can put a week's worth in there and re-up it every week. You can put a year's worth in there and re-up it every year. You can also take it out at any time. I think we don't allow you to take out 7 days worth of premium. So that basically enforces that you have to give us a 7 days heads up before you exit. But yeah, you can kind of manage that cash flow as closely as you want to.
So where's the money that I guess claims would be paid out coming from?
So Sherlock has its own proprietary pool of LPs, or not proprietary, it's open, but it's controlled by our protocol. So LPs, institutions, VC funds, individuals are able to stake into that pool, contribute capital. They get the premiums from protocols. We also invested into some yield strategies to get them some extra APY. But to answer your question, it's basically anyone in DeFi can contribute to a pool of capital.
And then are any of those people involved in the 4 of 7 multi-sig, or I guess, are you aware that they are large stakeholders in the UMA protocol?
None of the large stakeholders in that pool are on the 4 of 7 multi-sig.
Cool.
Cool. I think seems to be all of the questions, or anything else?
More questions?
Awesome. Well, that's all I've got for you guys today. Go to
Thank you very
Sherlock.xyz,
much.
sign
Thank
up
you.
to be a security expert, see if you can make some money. And yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks.